There's been many new options in the planar magnetic category. Hifi seems to be putting more effort into this market, and today we're taking a look at Sivga's latest attempt. This is the Nightingale, a $280 IEM that aims to attract you away from the more expensive, self-proclaimed premium brands. Let's see what this IEM can do. Sivga dedicates a lot of time to the design of the Nightingale. They say little about the sound signature. The company claims that the drivers will elevate the treble to, quote, a new level of transparency and cleanliness, resulting in expanded and wider soundstage. They say that the Nightingale will have punchy and elastic bass and make vocals sound rich, emotional, and slightly forward. The company does not provide a frequency response graph, so we don't have the benefit of a general example to consider. The Nightingale is a typical tear-shaped IEM. It is on the larger end of the IEM spectrum, similar in size to the 7 Hz Timeless. In other words, it can seem a bit bulky. The Nightingale is supposed to be made of aluminum, but it feels a lot like plastic. Sivga says they use a solid wood faceplate, which is polished and smooth. The Nightingale comes with a protective case and a handful of silicone ear tips. The cable is braided but covered in plastic. It terminates in balance 4.4 mm. The cable transmits little microphonics. It appears that the Nightingale comes with 2 variations of ear tips. The black tips are thicker than the gray. Sivga does not indicate in their marketing if this would cause any noticeable difference in presentation. As for fit, the Nightingale is quite easy to wear. Despite its larger size, the Nightingale is pretty light. It sits in my ears securely. I had no trouble wearing this IEM for about 3 hours at a time. I used the Nightingale for several weeks as one of my primary IEMs. I paired them with my FIO BTR7, Low 2 PAW S1, Matrix Mini I Pro 3, and Low 2 PAW 6000. I listened to my test playlist on Amazon Music HD, streamed lossy content on Spotify and YouTube, and consumed a wide assortment of other digital media, including TV shows and movies, while using the Nightingale. My listening impressions were first done with the black ear tips, which are thicker than the gray tips. I will briefly talk about the gray ear tips at the end of my sound summary. I wish I could do more of an A-B comparison with these ear tips on the Nightingale, but that is not possible with just one pair of IEMs. Sivga says that the bass is punchy and elastic, whatever elastic is supposed to mean. In my experience, the Nightingale has a noticeable sub-bass roll-off. Transience is quick, like other planar magnetic IEMs and headphones. In Mountains by Hans Zimmer, the thunderous rumble that starts at the beginning was distant and muted on the Nightingale. In contrast, the more neutral Moondrop Quarks presented this element with greater emphasis and slower reverberation. The Aria and Campfire Audio Andromeda similarly had greater sub-bass emphasis than the Nightingale. Clarity in the bass region was about average. Again, in Mountains, when the instruments played at maximum, they all blended together. When the rolling thunder effect entered into this mix, all the elements sounded distant and a bit muddled or muffled, similar to how the Aria presents it. Mid-bass is closer to neutral. Drum impacts are hard, but not sharp. In Conquer and Irodori, both drum-heavy tracks, the Nightingale was able to present each drum strike fairly clearly. I was also able to hear the placement of each drum, sometimes on the left and other times on the right, a bit close and once in a while further into the back. The Stellaris and Timeless render sub-bass very similarly to the Nightingale. The MT Pro, on the other hand, has a closer to neutral rendition, more elevated and with slightly longer reverberation. Mid-bass is sharper on the Stellaris than the Nightingale, but the Timeless, MT Pro, and Nightingale have similar sounding mid-bass. The mids on the Nightingale are forward. Vocals are sibilant and separate from mid-centric instruments. In Ola Gartland's Why Am I Like This, there's natural vocal grain and sibilance mixed in. The Nightingale accentuated the sibilance by 3 to 4 decibels in my estimation. The backup singer was easily audible near the end of the song, her voice a few steps behind Orla's. In Want You Back by Haim, the Nightingale again confirmed it does emphasize sibilance. The two backup singers were easily audible, one in either channel. When the instruments played at maximum, all three voices remained fairly clear, though their separation was reduced. Comparatively, the Stellaris has forward mids as well, but with a bit greater sibilance emphasis. Vocals on the Stellaris stand a little further ahead than on the Nightingale. Clarity and separation, however, is similar. The MT Pro has a more neutral presentation. It does not emphasize sibilance. Its clarity in this region is clearer than the Nightingale's. The Timeless presents mids similar to the Nightingale. Clarity and separation is similar. The Nightingale has a little bit more sibilance emphasis. The treble on the Nightingale is rolled off. It is slightly muffled, less energetic than that of the MT Pro and the Stellaris. The Timeless had a bit more emphasis as well, and was the most neutral rendition among all of these IEMs. The Nightingale seems to have a mid to maybe upper treble reduction. While brass and horns are apparent in a mix, they sound a bit distant or suppressed when compared to what I heard on the MT Pro, for example. I switched the gray ear tips at some point and performed the listening test all over again. And I think there's a clear difference, at least from what I could tell when looking at my notes with the black ear tips. There's a bit more bass emphasis with the gray ear tips, though not by much. Sub-bass seems to have slightly more obvious reverberation, and drum impacts appear to be harder and slightly sharper. Bass clarity was noticeably greater on the gray ear tips. The mids are still forward on the gray tips, but these ear tips also significantly emphasize sibilance, similar to how the HD560S pushes sibilance into your ears like a nail being driven in. Further, while the black ear tips did not emphasize vocal grain, the gray ear tips do. Mid-centric clarity and separation seems to be more obvious on the gray ear tips overall. The gray ear tips present sharper, more emphasized treble. With these tips, the Nightingale seems to have closer to neutral rendition with more clarity. As for detail, well, the Nightingale overall is not a detail monster. With the black ear tips, only obvious details were always present. Subtle or nuanced details are typically harder to hear with those ear tips. So the scratchy voices in a chorus may or may not be apparent, but twangs of guitar strings, sharp intakes of breaths, electric buzzing effects, and thumping on the body of a guitar should be. The gray ear tips have a different rendition. With these, details become more clear. Now, with the gray ear tips, the Nightingale produces both obvious and subtle details. In my noon light footstep test, the black ear tips rendered 7 to 8 clear footsteps. With the gray ear tips, the Nightingale presented 9 to 10. In comparison, the MT Pro rendered 9 clear steps, the Timeless rendered 8, and the Stellaris presented 6. As for soundstage, the Nightingale with the black ear tips has no better than average soundstage. I consider the Aria and Starfield as my average performers in this regard, so the Nightingale's presentation was like theirs. The MT Pro and Stellaris had wider soundstage. But with the gray ear tips, the Nightingale soundstage was similar to that of the MT Pro and Stellaris. Still, the Tin Hi-Fi T2 was wider than all of these. Frankly, I enjoy Sivga's products, generally speaking. They are typically well designed and reasonably priced. They do things a little differently from the competition, especially the big-name brands. The Nightingale is a good option in the planar magnetic IEM market. I don't think it does much to lead the competition, but it may not need to. The Nightingale has smooth treble with the black ear tips. Even with the marginal sibilance emphasis that these tips help reproduce, the Nightingale never sounds piercing or harsh, and it tends to have a warm sound signature overall, focused principally on the vocals. Sivga's inclusions of 2 types of ear tips will give you 2 different impressions of this IEM. I am surprised that Sivga did not market this, and I think they should have. Now, it is obvious that you can swap ear tips very easily on the vast majority of other IEMs, so this is not really a feature as much as the fact that Sivga was mindful enough to include 2 variations in the box. You have a few planar IEM options well below $200. Take a look at those if you are curious about these types of drivers, but don't want to spend much money on them. At I'm not convinced it does enough to be the planar IEM under $500, but it's a good option nonetheless. If Sivga sold the Nightingale at $200 instead of $280, I think the proposition would be much more enticing.